Good morning. I'm Charles Edwards, Assistant News Director and reporter for 90.1 FM WABE. We'd like to welcome our viewers to the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series, coming from Rhodes Hall, the headquarters for the Georgia Trust for Historic Preservation. This is the primary runoff debate between the Democratic candidates for Clayton County Sheriff. Let's meet the candidates, and they are in alphabetical order. Victor Hill. In 2004, Victor Hill was elected sheriff of Clayton County, making him the first African-American sheriff in the county's history. We also have Kimbrough. Kim is the current sheriff in Clayton County, and he was first elected in 2008. Here's the format for today's debate. In the first round, each candidate will answer 2 questions from our panel of journalists. In the second round, the candidates will ask a question of their opponent, and each candidate will have time for rebuttal in that round. And in the third round, the panelists will continue questioning the candidates. Finally, each candidate will have 30 seconds to make a closing statement. But before we get started, let's meet our 3 panelists selected by the Atlanta Press Club. First, we have Jim Burris, a reporter and host for Weekend Edition on 90.1 WABE. Next to Jim, we have Devin Feely, a reporter for 11 Alive. And our final panelist is Kurt Yeomans, who is a government reporter for Clayton Daily News. Now let's get started with the debate. In the first round, each candidate will be asked 2 questions by our panel. The candidates have 60 seconds to answer, and as moderator, I'll determine if a rebuttal is necessary. By random selection, Kimbrough gets the first question from Kurt Yeomans.
Sure, Kimbrough. You've had some issues with the county commission about your overtime budget the last couple of years. The point even you had to get more officers this year. How can the taxpayers of Clayton County be assured that if reelected, we're not going to see more overtime problems in the next 4 years?
Well, thank you, Kurt, for that question. What you characterize as issues, I characterize as a discussion. The county commission ultimately recognized that it was warranted to increase my budget so that we could avoid overtime. Work has to be done. And getting work done is a function of manpower, and manpower is not free. You can account for manpower in overtime, or you can adjust the budget upwards and add personnel. And what the county commission did was basically looked at a trend line of the 3 years of performance that I'd had in office and said that, when you looked at the trend line, the budget was basically stable, but at an increased level. And so they swapped from overtime to personnel. That's not an issue. That's how government is done.
And our second question comes from Jim Burris, and it's to Victor Hill.
Mr. Hill, I think we have to get this question out on the table. With 37 count indictment hanging over your head and a lot of questions about what could happen if you are indeed elected, why is right now the time for you to seek this office? Would it maybe be better for the people of Clayton County to let this all pass, either when you're acquitted or the indictments drop, than maybe seek re-election?
No, the time is now. Thank you for that question. Very, very important. We got to understand how these indictments came to be. These documents right here clearly show Sheriff's letterhead, Kimbrough's name. After I announced I was running for office, he ordered an investigation on me. 3 months after I decided I was running for office. After that, he had deputies follow me. Here's their log in their own words, going through my trash, through my mail. And we have a witness that was there that stated that this gentleman asked him, hey, find something on him. The charges are false. What am I charged with? Stealing my own police car 3 times in 10 days. Putting gas in a car I'm assigned to. Again, the paperwork is here. We release it to the media, and we will send it to any citizen that wants it. His lies should not stop us from going forward in this county.
Before Devin Feely asks Kimbrough a question, as moderator, I have the ability to see if the candidate wants a chance to respond or rebut. And Kim, do you want a chance to rebut what Victor just said?
I do. It's interesting that Victor speaks about documents, but he doesn't talk about all the documents. He doesn't talk about the documents where he accepted campaign checks and put them into his own personal account. He doesn't talk about the $15,000 check that he wrote to Naomi Nash and had her convert that and give it back to him. He doesn't talk about the county funds that he expended on those trips when he stole his police car, that car that belongs to Clayton County citizens. Victor has had an opportunity to take this case to trial and have it resolved before this election, but he chose not to. Instead, his lawyer filed motion after motion to keep this
All right,
case from
Kim,
going before
Kim.
the people. So
Okay.
that's my response to this. When we talk about documents,
Kim, we will bring up this issue, I'm sure, later on in the debate, but we have to keep moving. And Devin Feely from 11 Alive, now it's time to ask your question to Kim Kimbrough.
Well, Sheriff, my question is, your opponent is currently under indictment, obviously. That is a very unusual situation, but yet he was still able to get a significant portion of the vote. Does that suggest to you that there is some level of dissatisfaction with how you have conducted yourself during your first term in office?
I don't choose to see it that way. I do believe that in our experience has shown that there is a level of distrust in government. And of course, he plays a part in that. We have to continue to move forward to where we restore integrity to government. And so people trust the system. I think a lot of people don't understand the process whereby this indictment was handed down. 26 honest citizens of Clayton County saw all of the evidence, didn't look at any people's faces, names, reputations, but looked at the evidence. And they returned an indictment. And those 26 citizens are the people we should be paying attention to.
Before Kurt Yeomans asks his question of Victor Hill, Victor, if you want time for rebuttal.
Absolutely. What you can understand about this indictment and these 26 citizens is that he and his deputies lied to the grand jury, and we're going to prove that. And not only did they lie to the grand jury, but it was not a unanimous vote. And that was done without my attorneys being able to not only present these documents of how this started. These are charges that he brought, not the FBI, not the GBI, in fear of what's happening today, in fear that he would be in a runoff with me, and in fear that he's going to lose.
All right, time. And our final question in this round comes from Kurt Yeomans to Victor Hill.
Victor, in 2008, you filed for bankruptcy. Now, the Sheriff's Department carries a multi-million-dollar budget. How can the taxpayers trust you to handle that budget when you've had past problems with your own personal finances?
I think that's the very reason they can trust me. We've gone this country through financial hard times. I'm not the first to file for bankruptcy, won't be the last. And I think that makes me an even better leader because I can relate to what the citizens are going through in Clayton County. Everything was on the table. It was on there for everybody to see why we filed and see what the finances are. So I don't think that's an issue at all. I think actually it makes me one of the everyday citizens, which makes me a person not above them, but one of them.
That concludes the first round of our debate, and a reminder to the candidates, I know you brought information, but we have a rule about no props during the debate. It's now time for our candidates to ask questions of their opponent, and you have 30 seconds for the question, 60 seconds to respond, and 30 seconds for a rebuttal. By random selection, Victor Hill can ask the first question.
Thank you. Kim, you've had several sexual allegations against you with employees, sending inappropriate text messages. You've admitted on tape to paying an employee for sex, and in your words, you said it's not a lot of money. And now you're being sued by a female because she wouldn't participate in a threesome with you with another female who just gave birth to your child. How can you discipline employees for sexual misconduct or prosecute somebody for that when you engage in those type of legal activities yourself?
Well, first of all, I've never engaged in any of those activities that you refer to. And the allegations that you bring about, you're the only one spitting those allegations. No one else is talking about them. In fact, in the lawsuit that you refer to, every time we file an answer, she keeps changing her allegations because she doesn't know what happened. But I've got 2 witnesses who said that you put her up to it. So we'll air all that out in court. We won't sit here and deal with rumor and innuendo because what the people of Clayton County want is a sheriff who deals with facts, like what we presented to the grand jury.
Rebuttal?
You have time for rebuttal.
Well, again, this is a tape in your words. Your words. You said that you paid an employer $100 sex for money, which you said is not a lot of money, and you said you did on the other side of town where your wife couldn't see. I think it's very inappropriate for a married man to be doing that, and I think that's one of the reasons why you need to go.
All right, and now we have to, Kimbrough, you have your opportunity to ask a question of Victor Hill.
Well, my question centers around considering your financial mismanagement that's been well proven. How is it that you plan to pay your $250,000 judgment to Mark Tuggle? Are you going to steal that money from the sheriff's office? How are you going to handle that? Because you're in bankruptcy, you don't have any assets. He's been chasing you all around town for the last 4 years. How do you plan to do that and not break the Citizens Bank?
Oh, that's easy. If you would check the court records, which you being an attorney, you should do, that part of the judgment was dismissed. You need to really check stuff like that. I mean, absolutely, you're a bar attorney. And also, I think there's ethics on your line. So keep that in mind.
Kim, you have time for rebuttal if you need it.
there's no need to rebut his silliness.
All right, well, that concludes the second round of questioning. For those who may be joining our program in process, this is the debate among the candidates in the Democratic runoff election for Clayton County Sheriff. For our third round, we return to our panel of journalists who will ask questions of the candidate of his choice. Candidates will be allowed 60 seconds to respond, and as moderator, I will determine if a rebuttal from the other candidate is necessary. We begin this round with a question from Jim Burris.
Mr. Hill, this question is to you. 2 of the 8 seeking Clayton Sheriff, including one person you yourself fired, say you're the best of the 2 candidates. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution wrote that you suggested any comment on these endorsements would come here during this debate today. So what comment did you intend to make, and why wait a week to do it?
Well, I think that comments should be made for unedited circumstances like this so it can get out to the public. I want the public to hear what I got to say unedited. We're very honored to have those 2 endorsements. And let me say this, if we remember, back in 1775, there was a commander. He had a military operation. It failed. Then he had another military operation. 14 people got killed by friendly fire. But he returned, and he won the American Revolution. His name is George Washington. He's a founding father. I think that's a good example of what they're trying to say about me. We've learned from anything we've done, and we're going to come back and do it better.
Devin Feely, it's your turn to ask a question.
Sheriff, your first term in office was characterized by a lot of infighting, acrimony, public squabbles with the police department. Why shouldn't voters believe that if you returned to office, that it wouldn't be 4 more years of the same?
I think I answered that question. I want to reiterate it again. Classic example, what I said with the founding father. He had 2 failed military operations. But what did he do? He learned from it, he came back, he won the American Revolution. And where would our country be today if he didn't return? I think we got to ask that question about Clayton County. You know, my opponent will claim that he reduced crime by 14%, and the citizens who are being raped, robbed, and murdered will look at him and scoff and discuss on that. What will happen if we don't have a crime fighter return? And that's what we need to ask.
Kim, your opponent brought up some crime stats. You want to rebut that?
Well, it's clear from the crime statistics that crime is down in Clayton County. And to the extent that there are these isolated incidents you talk about, there's 14% less of them across the county. To try to convince people that you can eradicate crime is, I think, disingenuous. It's a lie. We have worked hard to work with the citizens to reduce crime, and we're going to continue to do that. And that's factual. That's not playing to the fears and the sympathies of people who have been victimized. Those people deserve our support and not our exploitation.
All right, our next question comes from Kurt Yeomans.
Victor, you have built a campaign around a Batman-esque, bring back the crime fighter theme. Yet, with a 37-count indictment, how can criminals take you seriously as a sheriff if you yourself facing criminal charges?
Good question. How can we take 37 indictments serious when the sitting sheriff is the one that brought those charges against me after he found out that I was running for office? And I have documents here that I can't use based on what he just said that shows that prior to that, they had wrote a report saying that they had found no wrongdoing in my administration whatsoever. We have a witness that will come forth. Matter of fact, he's already spoken to Wendy Saltzman, and he confirmed, yes, I was present when Kimbrough asked us, find me something on Victor Hill, find me anything. And when you see how ridiculous and flimsy these charges are, and then you take all of these charges about putting gas in a car and you put it under the, quote, RICO Act, this proves his lack of character and integrity. If he did that to me, what would he do to somebody else? Suppose he wants to have an affair with somebody else's wife. Will he put them in jail on false charges? That's what we got to ask.
Kim, you have time for rebuttal.
I think it's really interesting that instead of sticking to facts, he makes personal attacks. This is about the truth. What's important to notice is that Victor keeps talking about the political motivation. He hadn't said he hadn't done it. He doesn't want to talk about the checks. He doesn't want to talk about the bank records. Those things have nothing to do with any kind of motivation. Either you wrote the checks, you signed the checks, and you moved the money, or you didn't. That has nothing to do with what you think about me or what I think about you. And indeed, the sheriff has a duty to uphold the law.
All right, time. And our next question is coming from Jim Burris.
Sheriff Kimbrough, a certain local AM radio show, talk show host, tweeted this. Said, if Clayton County voters make Victor Hill sheriff again, we will know that county deserves its reputation as a cesspool of crime and corruption. My question is, do you think that Clayton County has such a reputation, and do you have any ability to change that?
It's unfortunate that I think there are some people that try to hang that reputation on Clayton County. Clayton County is a county, like many others, that has its fair share of challenges, but is a county full of people who work hard every day and who deserve better than that reputation. Unfortunately, we continue to have these associations with certain people in our community that they themselves want to make Clayton County out to be a cesspool. We want to talk about false allegations of increased crime. We want to talk about false allegations about our public officials and their personal lives. We turn that reputation on ourselves, and our people deserve better than that. They deserve to be represented by someone with class, integrity, and who speaks from fact. And that's really what this is about. The people of Clayton County have an opportunity to get back to business and continue on that path, or return to foolishness.
Victor Hill, you have a chance for rebuttal.
Absolutely. I think that our current sheriff is part of the reason we have that reputation. Anytime you have a sheriff, anyone can go on the internet and see him giving a universal sign. And children can see this. Anytime you have a sheriff that's involved in illegal sexual activities, paying employees for sex, I don't see anything he's done to make the county a better image. I think it got worse under his administration. And anyone that lives in Clayton County will tell you that crime is not down. Anyone can play with numbers. And as we can see from these documents, he's a liar.
Time. Devin Feely asks our next question.
I want to re-ask a question that I asked before about the squabbles with the police department, because I want a clear answer on this. In your first administration, there was a contention that that the two departments should merge under your leadership. Do you still believe that? And would you still pursue that in a second term?
I will always believe that any county, even under the inefficient leadership that we now have as a sheriff, if that vote was today, I would vote for it as a citizen. I believe it saves money. Is it my priority? No, my priority right now is to take the streets back from the criminals, especially with the astronomical burglaries. But I will always believe that that's the fiscal thing to do. And even if that vote was today, even though we have a weak and competent sheriff, I would vote for it.
Kimbrough, you have time for rebuttal.
I think that Victor Hill keeps hanging himself, and he keeps letting the people know where his heart truly lies. The people should be in charge of that discussion. And when the people make the point that they're ready for such an action to take place, that's when the debate is appropriate. Right now, we're still subject to the fantasy and whim of Victor Hill.
Our next question comes from Kurt Yeomans.
Sheriff Kimbrough, I have a couple of questions. Well, a long question about your campaign finance report from June 30th. You listed $2,500 in contributions from Stockbridge-based Correct Health LLC, which has a contract with the jail, or at least did a year ago, to provide medical services to the jail. And you also received $44,250 in contributions from 4 bail bonding companies in Clayton County. And as sheriff, aren't you supposed to be able to decide who gets bail bonding and who doesn't in the county? Isn't that a conflict of interest for you to be receiving these contributions?
No, absolutely not. It's not a conflict of interest. I don't give them any special privileges. They are all subject to my management. They all have to turn in their reports. They all have to be accountable for their funds. They are all regulated the same regardless of their contribution. In fact, what you'll see is that not all of the bail bonding companies wrote checks to contribute. So what? They like the leadership, they like the management, and they like our cooperative attitude and the way that we're trying to move the system of justice forward in Clayton County. Everyone has a First Amendment right to contribute as they see fit. That's the short answer.
Victor Hill, you have time for rebuttal.
Well, there's a bail bonding company that he shut down just because he thought that they supported me twice. That's a fact. But what I think is a conflict of interest is not necessarily them giving them money. I think it's a conflict of interest for someone to lock up their political opponent to win a race.
All right, our next question comes from Jim Burris.
Mr. Hill, we've heard today a lot about what you don't like about your opponent. Tell me something that you do like about him, something you admire.
Well, I like his grin. I think that a person that can grin and lie at the same time is interesting.
So you would like that quality in yourself?
No, absolutely not. I mean, I think it's interesting that he can sit up and tell bold-faced lies about locking up his political opponent on false charges and then sit there and have that grievance.
But the question was something you admire in him.
I can't really say that a man that would put someone in jail on false charges and win an election is someone I admire.
And Sheriff Kimbrough, actually, the same question to you. What do you admire in Mr. Hill?
Absolutely nothing.
And our next question comes from Devin Feely.
Sheriff Kimbrough, your opponent has suggested that the indictment was something that began at your urging. Can you just respond to that directly? Did you have anyone from your staff investigate the former sheriff?
Yes, there were sheriff's deputies from my office involved in the investigation. But the initiation of the investigation was a cooperative endeavor. First of all, our district attorney, Tracy Graham Lawson, is the one who impaneled the special grand jury to investigate public corruption. And between she and I, this is one of the public corruption cases that has always been out there and people have always talked about, and that the special grand jury themselves wanted to look into. And so, yes, my office was involved in forwarding documents and records under our control, as well as conducting further investigation to flesh out those documents. But everything was subject to the district attorney's control, and certainly once we had identified sufficient evidence to move forward with an indictment, a special prosecutor from outside of the county was brought in to conduct her own independent review, and then she presented that information to a second grand jury that was not privy to what the special grand jury was privy to. Those same 26 citizens with no political influence, outside prosecutor, still returned the indictment.
Victor Hill, you have time for rebuttal.
Absolutely. He and his deputies, matter of fact, the two deputies he put in charge of the investigation are deputies I fired. They lied to the grand jury, they lied to the district attorney. How do you explain this document that I got sitting right here that I'm gonna leave for you? That he had deputies following me 3 years after I'm out of office, going through my mailbox, going through my trash can, running tags of people who support me so he could see exactly what I'm doing on the campaign. There are witnesses that that's what he said that he wanted done. That has absolutely nothing to do with these so-called alleged 37 count indictments.
Time. Our next question comes from Kurt Yeomans.
Victor, there's a campaign finance report that you filed by mail in March of this year, but the others were filed by electronically. Now, the electronic ones are easy for citizens to access, but the mailed-in one, not so easily. They have to, if they have transportation, which in Clayton County most people don't, they have to get down to Atlanta. Why did you file that one in particular by mail, which makes it harder for citizens to access?
That one is going to be filed electronically, or may already have been. We got a new person helping with it, and they unfortunately didn't know about the new process, so they did it the way that they were used to doing it. But all of them have been filed electronically and will be filed electronically. I think that person's doing a great job, and I think it's just an oversight on their behalf. But you're welcome to it. I'll give you a copy, and it's going to be filed electronically.
Our next question comes from Jim Burris.
Sheriff Kimbrough, looking back on your last term, what would you do differently in the next term in comparison?
Certainly we need to continue to advocate for closer ties to our community. There are some things that we need greater involvement in the community with, and there are some things that we need to put greater emphasis on when it comes to that. That is the key to solving Clayton County's problems anyway, is working together with the community. So I would definitely move into a second term with a greater focus on the community, reinforcing their initiatives, reinforcing their ideas about how they want to see life and quality of that life.
We have no more time for questions. Each of the Democratic candidates in the runoff for Clayton County Sheriff will now have 30 seconds for a closing statement, and Kimbrough was randomly selected to make the first statement.
Well, citizens of Clayton County, this is a pivotal time in our history. We have an opportunity to continue to move forward under three things: service, safety, and stability. Service to you, that's what I'm committed to. That service is going to lead to safety, and that safety is going to lead to the stability that we need in our county. It's time to end the foolishness. It's time to end the chaos. It's time to get away from our troubles in our past, and let's move forward and build a great Clayton County.
And our final statement, closing statement, comes from Victor Hill.
My dear fellow citizens, this race is about one thing and one thing only. It's about crime and who can best deal with the crime situation at hand in Clayton County. We know that the sheriff we have now has been ineffective in doing that and has used the office nothing more than for sexual fantasies. I ask you to bring me back so I can do what I do best, and that's fight the crime in Clayton County and restore law and order.
Well, that concludes our debate. We'd like to remind voters that the primary runoff election takes place on Tuesday, August 21st. Our thanks to our candidates and to our panel of journalists. We'd also like to thank the Atlanta Press Club for arranging today's debate. And we'd also like to thank Rhodes Hall, the headquarters for the Georgia Trust for Historic Preservation, for hosting us. For more information about Rhodes Hall, you may go to rhodeshall.org. And for more information about Georgia Trust, you can go to georgiatrust.org. I'm Charles Edwards. Thanks for joining us for the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series.